we're back for another episode of On the Record with Tiffany. And I'm your host, Tiffany Jones-Smith. And we're here on 9:30 a.m. The Answer, our original home. And we can be seen on the African American Network television, where we have a local feel with a global reach. And I'm here today with one of my favorite guests, Deborah Omowale, the CEO of the San Antonio African American Community Archive and Museum. And I have another special guest, Valerie Reiffert. And Valerie, you tell our audience a little bit about the organization that you're with and what you're doing here.
Thank you so much for having me. Yes, my name is Valerie Reiffert. I am a co-founder and executive director of Radical Registrars. Radical Registrars is a grassroots organization that was born out of the George Floyd Black Lives Matter protest of 2020. We decided to put our collective pain and anger towards getting our community registered to vote, and then empowering them with knowledge and by creating voter guides specific to issues affecting our communities. Our mission is to empower, engage, and educate voters through civic education and voter mobilization across Central Texas. And our vision is to create a generation of informed and empowered young, BIPOC, LGBTQ plus folks who vote every single election. So thank you so much for having me today.
You're welcome. Wow. That's a lot. That's a huge mission and vision. But it's a mission and vision that is long overdue, because the only way that you change things in this country is through the vote. That single vote makes a big difference.
So
Absolutely.
I want to know how young people can get involved, because I have a number of people that I want to share this with. So sorry,
go ahead.
I had to ask.
Go ahead,
Tiffany,
because I'm very interested in it too. We've long lived with this concept that someone else is going to take care of things for us, and that is not how you live and thrive in the United States. You live and thrive in the United States by taking care of a lot of things yourself, and the vote is one of those things that empowers us to do that. So I want to hear all about it. Tell us. The floor is yours, ma'am.
Thank you so much. So I just like to use just my experiences from voting and just with life in general. I'll be 35 this year. I look a little younger than I.
Yes, you do, because I thought you were in your 20s.
Thank you. No,
I was thinking, who is this kid?
No, and I'm a whole mom too. I'm somebody's mom too. So, so I just really use my experiences with voting and just the process of voting. I remember, my parents are both military, college educated. And so that was definitely, education was definitely, something that was definitely a priority for me growing up. And so, but thinking about voting and my experiences being a young voter, I would vote for the presidents and stuff, but I would go with one name in mind. And then I would go and vote, and I would leave feeling like, well, what exactly did I just do? Because you're voting for way more than just one thing when you go in there. And I would literally find myself just like picking the least offensive name. Like, I just didn't know what I was doing. And so when,
and how many people are like that, right? How many people are like that? Are walking in and voting, and they're completely uninformed. They haven't read anything. They haven't looked at the person's voting record. They know nothing about the candidates. They're just going by their sound bites, which don't help us in any way, because you can have a candidate that's voting and working in your best interest, but may not be this party or that party. They're just doing what needs to be done for you. So you got to think it through.
Right. And I remember like trying to research, but feeling like I didn't know what to Google to like find everything just in one, concise, put together, document or something. And then I didn't even know about the League of Women Voters until 2020, when they found me from, like just being out on the news and out doing the work. So I didn't even know, but now that is a group that I'm connected with, and I'm actually planning on picking up some of their voter guides and getting them out to the community, because just so many people just do not know that at every library location, there are voter guides from the League of Women Voters, and you can use these voter guides while you're voting like it's an open note test. And just so many people do not know that, and I think that's for a reason. And so I like to say that I'm a reformed gossip now, and now I do all my telling for good. And so now I'm putting business out there, but it's good business. It's stuff people should be knowing, not stuff that ain't nobody's business, but stuff that should be everybody's business, which, people need to know that you cannot rely on your cell phone when you go to vote. It's illegal to have your phone, out while you are voting, but you can have a piece of paper. You can have a voter guide that has the information about the candidates that you want and need to be able to make informed decisions. And so that's what I tell young people to get involved. Like one thing, I'm like, y'all did not turn 18 and 21 years old to still have old folks making decisions for you. So let's go ahead and get involved. But then just being really honest and candid with them, which I think is what sets us apart, because at Radical Registrars, we don't feel like issues that affect humanity are political. And so we don't feel like social justice issues are political. We don't feel like healthcare is political. We don't feel like those issues are political. And so those are the conversations that we're going to have, with young people. And so I just, I tell them, like when you don't vote, you are letting, people make decisions for you who may not have the same values that you have. And so, and I also like to tell people, when Barack Obama ran for president in 2008, it was a record number voter turnout. And then there were people who voted for Obama in 2008 that never voted again. And then a lot of people like to say, well, he didn't do X, Y, and Z for the Black community. Well, we stopped showing up and voting because when an election came up in 2010, people didn't show up and vote. So he lost the House, and then he ended up losing the Senate, and he wasn't able to really pass too much. And so that was on, the voters for thinking like, okay, it's good, I showed up that time, and then you sat out. And then when you see what happened, like 2008, 2012, and then 2016, when a lot of people sat out and was like, oh, it's fine. We had somebody in office who was very much not for, people of color. And so I just try to just make it real, because young people, they're not trying to hear, oh, people bled and died for you to vote. Unfortunately, that's not really resonating with young people. But what is resonating with young people is that, hey, there are people out here like quite literally making laws that affect your day-to-day life. Like there are, laws on our women's health. There's laws on Black folks. There's laws on, the homeless population and stuff like that. And it's like, also, I ask them like, who's in office? Do people in office look like you? The people in office quite literally reflect the population that shows up and votes for them. And so that's what we just really try to do, is just encourage people to get involved that way and just make it real for them, for, young folks.
And you're right, because some of the things that exist in terms of equity and inequity, some of those things, when you have people that look like you in office, you can address them.
Absolutely.
Because they're going to have an interest in addressing all of those problems in a way that would be conducive to us.
Right.
As well. It's not a one-sided discussion or asking someone else to help you with the discussion. There definitely has to be an olive branch extended, but we should be the ones shaping the narrative around our community.
Oh, absolutely. Valerie,
I love that you're doing that, Valerie.
Thank you so much.
I don't know if you had a chance to see this week, a report was released called The State of African Americans in Bexar County. And what I guess, if Tiffany allows me to talk about, there's some statistics in there as it relates to criminal justice. And one of the things that is certainly important to me personally is how we are represented in the criminal justice system. We made history last election by having 3 African-American female judges be elected at the Bexar County court system. Well, they now all have people that are running against them. When you look at the numbers of the effects of criminal justice, and I only put a few, but they are in that report. And you think about judges are bipartisan, right? They don't come with a Democratic or a Republican label. So it fits really well with what you all are doing at Radical Registrars. So make sure that you get this information out. So in the criminal justice system, Bexar County Jail, now African Americans make up about 8% of the population here in San Antonio per the census. We actually are a little more than that when you look at the military and people living here temporarily, but permanent around 8%. So the population in the Bexar County Jail of African Americans on misdemeanor charges is 24%. That is 3 times more than what we are, where we are, population-wise. The number of African Americans in the Bexar County Jail for felonies is 15%. That is almost twice of our population. The number of African Americans that are referred to juvenile probation, 19.6%.
Wow.
And from, one more, assault offenses that have been convicted, 16.2%. That's convictions that are sentenced. So when you look at those numbers, and I guess we'll talk about that after the break, it's not because we don't know how to act.
Right.
There's a lot of things that point to why it is. And so that's why we have to vote.
And we are having an interesting discussion right now about voting. That time of the year is coming up. We've got primaries for both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party coming up. And we will be experiencing candidates and voting. One of the most important rights that you have in this nation, and that people are willing to cross the ocean to get to this country in order to be able to engage in. So let's talk about it with two of my favorite experts, a recent new favorite expert, Valerie Reiffert with Radical Registrars, and my, of course, partner in crime.
Good crime.
That's right.
Good trouble, yes.
Deborah Omowale with the San Antonio African American Community Archive and Museum.
Okay, and Valerie wanted to chime in on those statistics before I
So Deborah,
comment.
give the statistics real quick again, so in case people are just listening to this segment.
Okay, hold please. All right, the percentage of people in the Bexar County Jail for misdemeanors that are African American is 24%. In the Bexar County Jail that are felons, African American, 15%. That's 2 to 3 times higher than the population of African Americans here in San Antonio. The number of African Americans that are referred to juvenile probation is 19.6%. And the number of African Americans that have been sentenced due to assault offenses that are non-sexual are 16.2%. That, from a voter perspective, that tells us a lot of things. And I certainly have some opinions, but I think Valerie is an expert, and I would like to hear what she has to say and how to mobilize young people to make sure they know when you vote for the DA, which is not necessarily in the presidential elections, it's those off years too. It's the DA, it's the attorney generals, it's the judges. Those votes matter. That's some of the reason why these statistics are where they are.
Exactly. That's what
Looked at me like,
no, you're so right. That's exactly what I've been telling people. So one thing that we have to let the community know is that we have to dispel this rumor that people who have a felony on their record or were previously incarcerated, that they cannot vote or there's some type of waiting period. People who have a felony on their records, as long as they are off papers, off parole, probation, they're no longer paying any fines, they can absolutely get registered to vote. And a lot of people do not know that. I've spoken at a barber college before. And I was telling them that, and people literally thought you had to wait 7 years, like it was your credit or something for it to fall off. And so, yeah, they really do, because of these like hood rumors that are going around. That's really what it is. And so every chance that I get to tell somebody that, I find it so important to let them know that just because you have a felony on your record does not mean that you cannot vote or participate. Your vote is actually even more important because you've been in the system. You've gotten to really see what these judges are about. Like, we on the outside, we only get to see what the judges are campaigning for. You, as somebody who was inside, you get to see if this judge was actually keeping their promise on what they said that they were going to do. And you know if this judge is rehabilitative or if they're more punitive. And so that's what I've really been letting the community know, like, hey, y'all, do you know that the DA is up for election? Do you know that judges are up for elections? So Radical Registrars is actually going to be doing civics courses at Bexar County Jail this year. And so I'll be going in there and educating the population and letting them know. And then also what another really important piece is, especially locally, one is that your voice is so much stronger locally, right? Like, instead of over 70 million, your voice is like one of like 17 million. So it's really important that you vote locally. But especially, with these local elections, oh my gosh, I'm losing my thought. It's such a good one.
Okay, the school board. We can talk about the school board.
Goodness. School board's super important too. Super duper important.
Local is where you do make a difference in your day-to-day life. Federal, when we're talking about national elections and statewide elections, they're important. But those local elections, your school board, when you're talking about the DAs, and people need to understand what each office does. What do they do? Because we have a really great system here in terms of the judges, and those three judges that Deborah mentioned earlier. The way that they've structured their courts is phenomenal. And it's actually modeled in other places now.
And you can listen to them on their courts on YouTube.
They're
so you can
good.
really be
They are so thorough. Like, they really want people to know that they are out here trying to do right in the community. No, these judges are absolutely amazing. And that's what I tell people too.
And that's, a lot can be said for them. I interviewed our DA, Joe Gonzalez, and one of the things he did when he came in was he looked at the fact that there was some disparities going on in terms of how African-American people were being treated. And so he changed how he structured things with the police and what had to be filed and when, and whether or not you had to speak with someone and interview everyone at the scene, because that wasn't happening. Like, there was he went through and made changes that now we can see modeled in other places, and we see positive benefits coming from it now. That's stuff that people need to know, because the importance of having the right person in that seat is something that should be at the top of your brain when you're making decisions about who's going to be voted in.
Absolutely. Yeah. So this election, we're not going to be able to make our voter guides the way that we want to, but we're definitely going to, that's the pivot that I was making, was letting these people know like what exactly is up for election and what that means. So it's like, if you care about social justice, then you need to make sure that you're voting for the county commissioners and the county judges. And you need to make sure that you're voting for the DA to make sure that you have somebody in there reflective of your values. A thing with the county commissioners and the judges, which is another effort that Radical Political Registrars is a part of, is that we're going to be bringing jail-based voting to San Antonio. We're going to be bringing jail-based voting to Bexar County because one, will be the second in Texas to do it. Harris County started this last year with the constitutional amendments, but there are so many people who are detained in jail who are in there due to finances or whatever the case may be, but they are absolutely eligible to be able to vote. And so bringing voting to Bexar County will allow, that big population that you spoke of. Clearly, there's more Black people in there than out here, out in the streets. So giving them the opportunity to be able to vote is super important. So that's an effort that is local activists, the county commissioners, and the sheriff's department that has to work together to do. And that's what we're doing. And speaking of the sheriff, Javier Salazar, that is an elected position. Our county sheriff is an elected position. And so just getting that information out to the public and letting them know how truly powerful that their voice is and who they can elect in there if they were just to participate is just so important to let people know, because a lot of folks don't know.
Every vote counts. It's important to take that seriously, because you literally can make a difference for the community right there, at least steps towards a difference for the community right there.
Every vote counts and every election counts.
Mm-hmm.
And
Absolutely.
That's
every election.
the huge piece. And when we look at even those statistics that I gave, and you understand the new Jim Crow or that public school pipeline to prison. Mm-hmm. And this is where we circle back for the school board, right? When you look at how many African-American children are suspended due to subjective reasoning, 93% of the African-American students in the state of Texas that are suspended for subjective reasonings because they were disrespected to the teacher.
Yeah.
So that sets up that whole process of getting to prison. How can we change that? The people that we vote into school board, our voice at PTA and all of that. When we start putting police in schools and taking that power away from school officials and from school teachers. Now, I mean, it's like the system is set up for us to change. I'm not going to say it's set up for us to fail. It's set up for us to change. But like Barbara Jordan said, we have to know the rules of the game. Yeah. And even when they change the game, we have to quickly learn those rules again.
Yeah. And, but the key to this is putting people in place that are the rule makers. Mm-hmm. When you have people in place that are the rule makers, that is a game changer.
Absolutely.
And the only way to put people in place who are the rule makers is to vote. Mm-hmm. That's it. Mm-hmm. Bottom line, point blank, because changing how our children are viewed, first of all, I've got my own opinion on that. But because, it's easy to approach African-American children with punitive immediately, as opposed to therapeutic, because we tend to approach other groups therapeutically. Methamphetamines is a perfect example of that. We have a therapeutic approach to meth.
Valerie is like,
and a punitive approach to crack. Mm-hmm. Punitive to crack, therapeutic to meth. And that is 100% because of what the demographic looks like in both of those two drugs.
And opiates as well.
Yeah. Oh, yes. It's
That's what it is.
Crisis. It's a crisis because of who it's affecting.
It's a crisis. It's children. Yeah. And it is all of those things, but that's the same thing for African Americans. Mm-hmm. So if we're applying the mercy that goes along with therapy, see, that word mercy needs to be utilized and applied regardless of color, because mercy is applied regardless of color.
Yeah.
If you know who gives mercy, you know that it is. Right. So we should use the same mercy for people of color who are dealing with the same issue, which is a drug being loosed in their community, and no one really understanding just how addictive and how terrible it is until you've got a percentage of people that are completely inundated with it. You know, that every time I look at the two, I'm incensed, not angry because white children are receiving therapy. I'm angry because Black children aren't.
Are not. Absolutely.
Right.
And it's the same thing. And anybody that thinks that it is not destruction to this nation to leave one group or a group of people of color, because really that applies to everyone, to leave people of color underserved in this way and pushed aside in that way. It is a detriment to the nation for us to do that. So anyway, Valerie, you didn't want to hear, people aren't listening for my opinion. We're listening for your, for yours.
But no, you're 100%, nail on the head. I agree. And especially with schooling, my son, he'll be 4 in April, and I was very involved at my high school. I was allegedly the first Black homecoming queen at my high school in 2006 here in San Antonio. I was a varsity athlete all 4 years. And then I was also a class officer, which means that I'm in charge of planning class reunions, moving forward. And so just be as involved as possible. And I went and spoke to the superintendent of my school district and telling him about the experiences that I had with racist teachers and leadership. Like on the way to our state track meet, one of the track coaches in Austin traffic was yelling, cursing at us and throwing stuff at us. None of us told our parents, they weren't there. We still felt like we had a job to do. But, even telling the school district about it now, it was almost 15 years later at that point. It's just like his eyes glazed over, like just couldn't even care less about, the experiences that I had, especially with some of these teachers and coaches still teaching today, like at these schools. And so it's just very kind of obvious and apparent whose interests are being upheld, really, especially with this at the school level. And so it's very important for us, like as Black mothers and Black people, to make sure that our children are in districts that are going to care about them and keep them safe. Because some of these school districts just do not have our best interests at heart. It's very under the radar that a Black child actually committed suicide on a campus in San Antonio, Texas, in a more affluent area. And when I tell you not a sound was made, but then in Alamo Heights, there was a child who died by suicide. And then you see just ribbons and everything all over that community and them saying that child's name. And it's just a huge difference, like with those two examples of how people get treated just merely because of the color of their skin.
And the thing about that is that there's not a school district you can approach that doesn't have the same problem. So there's not a district you can go to. You have to get out and vote and deal with the school boards, because in order to not have this issue, then you have to deal with it across the board. There's not a school district you can go to that doesn't have somebody that's doing something like that in regards to Black students, because I know with my own, I have a 12-year-old and a 9-year-old, and we have dealt with stuff that I've discussed with you, Deborah, about that directly related to that. And we had a little boy on the playground with my oldest daughter, call her names, and my daughter did not say anything to me about it. It was this feisty little white girl that she's friends with. And that shows you like children are not thinking about this stuff in terms of isolation. Not all children are doing that. There's, other children are learning things at home that are negative, but children are learning things at home that are positive. So this little girl comes up to me and says, Mrs. Smith, this boy has been calling Ernie names and she won't tell you, but I told him and I'm telling you.
I love it.
What's going on?
I love it.
And so she had talked to her mom. So she and her mom were rolling tag team, and they came up to me. And so I said, honey, what's going on, baby? And she didn't want to say anything because she didn't want to draw attention to herself any more than what he was doing by calling her names. And the little girl was like, we got to stand up and let these people know.
Yeah.
And her mother was the same way. They were both like,
yeah.
And, but I said that to say, and we handled it. We weren't as militant as the little white people were, but I just called the school and said, hey, let's have a sit down and let's talk about this. This child is learning this from home.
Yeah.
So it's really more of a conversation that I expect you all to have with his parents. And no, I'm not looking for you to kick this little boy out. He's a child. This is an adult subject, and his parents shouldn't be teaching him what they're teaching him. So it's a teachable moment for them.
So what's interesting with that, when you go back to the subjectiveness of suspending and expelling African-American students, in some schools that would have been considered disrespectful, and that child would have been suspended,
right?
Especially if they were Black or brown.
That's right. They didn't even consider suspending him.
Of course not.
Of course not. Of course not.
Wasn't even considered.
Of course not. And while we're talking about civics and the importance of voting, so we've talked about voting for our school board candidates, right? Trustees, and that's the same with our college district as well. We talked about voting for judges and voting for the DA and voting in local elections, but we also, from a civics perspective, need to talk about our duty to be on juries. Because again, when you go back to these statistics, and you talk about people that are sentenced because of felonies, my question would be, what do the juries look like?
Right.
And we have to get out of this, no, I'm not going to sign up for jury duty. I don't want to judge anybody.
Because there are so many, like if you bring up the subject of jury duty, everybody talks about not wanting to do jury duty. When that is one of your, every time we talk about the freedoms in this nation, this is a great nation. We don't have to make the nation great again. What we have to do with this nation is we have to realize all the freedoms that we're allowed here and utilize those freedoms. Utilize. You can't complain about this nation if you don't get out and vote.
Absolutely.
Right.
Vote.
Right.
Don't sit there talking trash to me about what's going down. And you hadn't even bothered to, hop your behind up off the couch and go vote.
So what do you say to someone who says, well, I just really, and I encounter this with young people because I'm talking to young people, I just really don't believe my vote counts.
You're wrong.
Yeah.
Unequivocally, you're wrong.
But that's what they want you to think, like this is what I've learned is that Texas ranks 49th in voter turnout of the 50 states. So we are 49th. In 2020, over 10 million Texans showed up and voted. It was almost split down the middle. Over 10,000 Texans showed up and voted in 2020. And then in 2021, it was numbers that hadn't been seen in 30 years in 2020, a record number turnout. In 2021, those lawmakers who rely on elections to get and keep their jobs made voting less accessible and more difficult. And the populations that are affected are the Black and brown populations. No more drive-through voting, no more 24-hour polling locations. And so really affecting those populations that turned out in record numbers really affecting us and trying to stop us. And so I think that shows that, there are some lawmakers who are trying to move the goalposts and take their ball and go to another court because they feel like, like they're beginning to lose. And so that should be even more motivation for you to show up and vote. The fact that they are trying to change the rules and make it more difficult. Why? There were over 7 million Texans who did not show up and vote in 2020. We're not necessarily a red state. We're just a really voter suppressed state with a really low voter turnout. People are just very unmotivated because cycle after cycle you hear, oh, that'll never happen in Texas. Oh, that'll never happen in Texas. And people hear it and just start to believe it. But truly, starting with like Gen X, if all the young people, if every college age person, Gen X or millennials would have voted when, at the start, when we first turned 18, things would be very, very different for us now. And
Absolutely.
so, yeah, your vote absolutely matters, especially locally. Your vote is even more stronger locally.
And I'm going to say this because it needs to be said. If you're willing to drive across town to go get a new purse, to go get a new pair of shoes, to go get whatever it is you want to get, then I know doggone well you can drive to that polling place. Whatever nonsense, whatever you think you need is not worth more than casting your ballot. You can drive, you can walk, you can take a bus, you can, whatever you have to do to cast that ballot, because that's one of the most important rights that you have. Absolutely. And I do say people fought and died so you could have that right, because we just celebrated MLK's birthday and he marched, our parents' age marched so that we would have opportunity and so that you all would have opportunity.
I want to encourage, if you need to drive across town to vote early or drive to an early polling place, it's typically easier. I have found where I live, oh my gosh, the last election, it was not at the Kirby City Hall, but Kirby City Hall was an early voting place. And I'd go in there and there's no line. Like zip, I'm just in and out, so quickly. And that's on my way to work. So when you think about early voting and the opportunities, and it starts February 14th, and the polls are typically open from, Valerie, you can help me out. Is it 7 a.m. to 8 p.m., something like that?
They changed it with SB1. So now it's going to be 8 a.m. to 6 p.m.
Oh, Father. Okay. So we need to make sure that we get out and vote. And that is interesting because those are work hours, right? The polls are only open for, what is that? 10 hours? That's 10 hours. And if you have to commute, then there you go. Now, what a lot of people don't know, there's a lot of jobs that will allow you leeway to vote.
By law, your employer must allow you time to go and vote. A lot of people don't know that. That's
thank you.
Must allow you time to go and vote.
And you simply have to tell them that.
You just have to tell them that. Thank you for that clarification. So on your way to work or on your way home, vote. Don't wait until election day. Something could always come up.
Yes, you can vote anywhere during early voting. A lot of people don't know that, but anywhere you see that's convenient, that has a sign up that says vote here, please pull up and vote there. I always tell people, hit the group chat, tell them, hey, who wants to go vote, and go with somebody. Like, don't ever go alone. There's always power in numbers. And then while we're on that, I also want to encourage people to be poll workers, work the elections. You can literally make between $15 to $17 an hour. Those are 10-hour days. Like we said, actually, you have to get there at 7 to set up. So you get, 11, 12-hour days working the election with setting up and breaking down. But I implore you to please apply to be election workers. We need to see familiar faces, like working the elections, kind faces, welcoming faces in there, people who look like, other people. We need to see people working the elections. And then also run for office. run for office because bigger fools than you have done it. And I'm just gonna leave it at that. I'm just gonna leave it at that.
Lord,
why not?
Now I wouldn't say it like that, but
but why not you? Is is what I'm getting at. Why
that's a better way to say that. Why not you?
Really?
You have something to offer the community.
Really. We, figure out what you stand for and what your purpose is. I want to go back.
Before you run, learn about the people that are running right now. You need to understand who they are, what's their voting record, and what does that mean to you? Is that going to be helpful to your community? Don't listen to just TV. Go look at the voting record.
Yes.
Don't listen to the sound bites. Go look at the voting record. That's going to tell you more than anything else.
And that League of Women Voters Guide, you have to take that with you. I also want to say, and Valerie, you can, because I don't know if I have the title right, but often what I'm hearing is people will go to the polls and there's a problem. And now what I'm hearing, people are saying, well, just cast your provisional vote. What I'm suggesting is to ask the precinct, is it the judge or what's the title?
The election judge.
To ask for the election judge before you say, oh, I'll just do a provisional ballot, because it could be a misinformed worker and the election judge can make the call there. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? Because I want to make sure people understand their rights once they get to the polls. Don't let them turn you away.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. You definitely don't get turned away. If you're in line and the polls close, but you're in line, make sure you stay in line. But yeah, just make sure there are phone numbers, which I don't have on me, but I know Black Voters Matter. They have a hotline. There's hotlines you can call if you're feeling like you're disenfranchised. I just wrote down the numbers. Call Bexar County Elections themselves, 210-335-VOTE. I think that's 8683, 210-335-VOTE. If you feel like you're being disenfranchised or if something is just not right at the polling location, if it don't feel right, it's probably not right. And that's another reason why I encourage people, do not vote alone. Like, make sure you have somebody there with you. I also like to encourage people to make sure they're following Radical Registrars. Reach out. You can reach out to me, DM me, and I can help you out in any way. I was definitely on it. In 2020, people were talking about, some disenfranchising was going on. And I was just on the phone, making phone calls, asking questions, figuring it out, naming names to the Bexar County Elections Department, letting them know which judges or clerks this was. I'm going to tell it. I told you I used to be gossip. I'm going to tell it. What?
You turn gossip for good.
Gossip for good, yeah. Gossiping for good now. Spreading that good information, important information. But yes, Radical Registrars, we always say vote informed. Make sure you know who and what you are voting for, and make sure that you match your interest.
Yeah, because there has to be a reckoning in terms of how we are dealing with the race issue in this country. And part of that reckoning needs to be us empowering ourselves with the very tools that we need. And one of those tools is the vote. And then the other is the legislation that goes with that.
Oh my gosh.
So,
yes.
And that's a talk for another day, but for sure, to begin with, is the vote. That is the one thing that you can exercise that no one else can take away from you. But in order for you to exercise it effectively, you have to be willing to get to the voting poll.
Yeah.
I don't care what lines you draw around what. I'm going to vote and cast my ballot and say what I need to say. And that has to be the attitude. It has to be an attitude of fortitude. We're going to get out there and do what needs to be done so that our voices can be heard. You can march until the cows come home. If you do not cast that vote, if you do not vote for the candidates that are going to serve the interest of your community, and if you do not write legislation and policy that is going to assist the community, then you have marched for no reason. You've marched for absolutely, positively no reason.
And when you look at history, we are going backwards when it comes to voter suppression. If we would show up at the polls, we wouldn't be worried about, are we going to change the filibuster rules in the Senate? We could just have enough votes in the Senate to be able to pass a voting rights bill. Why do we need to pass a voting rights bill and it's 2022?
Oh, yeah.
You know,
still fighting the same fights that, you know, Martin Luther King Jr. himself was out here fighting, you know, like not enough has changed. Not enough has changed. And this is the only system we have. And so we must participate in it if we want to see or feel a difference.
More would change if we would participate. So let's remember that. Now, come on now. You want change, you got to be a part of that change. You can't just talk trash to people and tell them, hey, you should be doing this right. Well, if I should be doing something right and I have to make the decision and you're not going to do nothing to make me make that decision, I ain't going to do nothing you want me to do.
Absolutely.
So you want people to change? Then act like it.
Absolutely.
Get out there and take your stance and be bold. This is the time to be bold, and being bold means I don't care what lines are drawn. I'm getting to that poll. I'm going to vote, and I'm going to know who I'm voting for and vote in my best interest. So I'm going to read up on stuff and actually understand who I'm voting for.
Absolutely.
Because, you know, you there may be some people that you wouldn't have thought you should vote for that you should be voting for. But you've been told one thing and you're buying into it and it's to your detriment. So we've got to be more informed and do what's right for our community.
Absolutely.
And that means driving, biking, busing, roller skating, whatever way you got to get there, get there.
I'm there. You know, Malcolm X said, a lot of people said it, but I attribute this to Malcolm X. If not us, who? If not now, when?
When?
Yes.
Exactly. Because who else is going to stand up for you besides you?
Yeah.
Hello.
Nobody can advocate for you better than you. You got
That's
to
right.
advocate for
That's
you.
right. You have to do that. So when you're sitting there thinking that you can't and I'm not, and they're going to, who is this illustrious they? I need their phone number.
Yeah.
They seem to make all kinds of things happen that I can, you know, they push they to the side. You are empowered. You can do what you want to do. And so what you need to do is vote.
Yeah.
Get yourself together and get out there and vote.
Yeah.
It's not enough to say, I love my community. Meanwhile, you're watching your community deteriorate around you. Because we've been watching. And that's across political parties. So that's across administrations. You can't attribute that to Republicans. You can't attribute that to Democrats. You can attribute it to the whole place all this time. So what culpability do we have in this? If we're sitting there watching our neighborhoods deteriorate and not voting and not doing the things that we can do to get ourselves together, then what are we saying here? At the minimum, you can say, I want better, so I'm going to do better, and I'm going to go out and vote.
Absolutely.
And you've been listening to On the Record with Tiffany. Thank you so much, Valerie, for being here with us and for sharing. And we are going to have you back often.
Yes, thank you so much. I really appreciate y'all.
Valerie, it was great meeting you.
It was so nice meeting y'all too.